The Samsung Galaxy A36 versus the Samsung Galaxy A35. Two phones that are practically siblings in Samsung's popular mid-range lineup. Both offer that sweet spot of features and affordability. But with the A36 being newer, you're probably wondering if it's worth the upgrade or if you should save cash with the A35. The differences might surprise you, and depending on where you live, the pricing gets really interesting. Today, we're diving into everything that separates these phones: design tweaks, performance changes, camera improvements, and whether that newer processor makes a real difference. For full specs and up-to-date pricing, check out the links in the video description below. Let's start with build quality and design. Both phones feel solid with practically no flex, but the A36 has some refinements. It's slightly thinner and lighter, while somehow fitting a larger 6.7-inch display versus the A35 6.6-inch screen. You probably won't notice the size difference unless you're holding them side by side, but the A36 does have slightly thinner bezels around the display. Both use plastic frames sandwiched between glass sheets with Gorilla Glass Victus Plus on the front, but the A36 gets the upgrade treatment with Victus Plus on the back as well. Both maintain that excellent IP67 water resistance rating, meaning they can handle 30 minutes submerged in up to 3 feet of water. Button layouts are identical with the same under-display fingerprint readers and similar stereo speaker setups. The A36 supports dual eSIM versus single on the A35, plus you get Bluetooth 5.4 versus 5.3. However, here's a big difference. The A35 keeps a microSD slot for storage expansion that Samsung completely removed from the A36. That tiny display size bump from 6.6 to 6.7 inches matters way less than the brightness levels. Both phones stick with the same full HD plus resolution and 120Hz refresh rate without any fancy adaptive switching, but the A36 absolutely crushes the A35 when it comes to peak brightness. We're talking significantly higher brightness numbers that make outdoor usage much more comfortable on the newer model. Both are usable in sunlight, but the A36 definitely has the edge here. Interestingly though, neither phone supports any form of HDR video playback, so you're not getting Netflix HDR or YouTube HDR on either device. Battery life gets really interesting because both phones pack identical 5,000 mAh batteries, but their behavior is quite different. Overall endurance is pretty similar between the two, but here's the surprising twist. The older A35 with its Exynos 1380 processor actually outlasts the A36 Snapdragon 6 Gen 3 when it comes to gaming sessions. If you're someone who plays mobile games for hours, the A35 might actually be the better choice for battery life. However, the A36 fights back with faster charging support. 45 watts compared to the A35's 25 watt maximum. In real-world testing, the A36 reaches higher percentages at the 15 and 30-minute marks and takes about 12 minutes less to reach full charge. Keep in mind, though, neither phone comes with a charger in the box, and for the A36 fastest charging, you'll need a 5-amp cable since the included one is only rated for 3 amps. Here's where the tech specs get fascinating. These phones use completely different chipsets that are surprisingly similar in performance. The A35 runs Samsung's Exynos 1380 built on a 5nm process, while the A36 uses Qualcomm's Snapdragon 6 Gen 3 on a more efficient 4nm process. Both have very similar octa-core CPU configurations, and in real-world performance, they're practically neck and neck. The A35 comes in 3 storage options: 6GB with 128GB, 8GB with 128GB, or 8GB with 256GB, all using UFS 2.1 storage. The A36 typically comes with 6GB LPDDR4X RAM and 128GB UFS 2.2 storage, with 8GB and 256GB versions available, plus some markets get a limited 12GB RAM variant. Remember though, only the A35 supports expandable storage through that microSD slot. Software support is where Samsung really shows favoritism toward the newer model. The A36 launched with One UI 7 and Android 15, Plus, Samsung promises a whopping 6 major OS updates over its lifetime. The A35 is still on One UI 6.1 with Android 14 and only gets 4 major updates. That's 2 extra years of software support for the A36, which definitely adds long-term value. Performance-wise, both phones offer excellent sustained performance and manage heat really well. Neither chipset runs particularly hot, and even during stress testing, both phones rarely get more than lukewarm to the touch. Camera systems show some interesting changes between generations. Both phones keep the same basic setup: a 50-megapixel main camera, 8-megapixel ultra-wide, and 5-megapixel macro camera. The big change is up front, where the A36 gets a 12-megapixel selfie camera, replacing the A35's 13-megapixel unit. For the main cameras, image quality is remarkably similar between the two. Samsung has tweaked the processing slightly, with the A36 applying a bit more sharpening and contrast, while the A35 tends toward a softer, more natural look. The A36 also tends to render shadows darker in its photos. The ultra-wide cameras are identical between both phones, so image quality is essentially the same, though the A36 applies less aggressive noise reduction, sometimes leaving more fine detail, but also more grain. In low-light conditions, the A36 does show a slight advantage with better detail retention, improved dynamic range, and superior contrast. However, for selfies, we actually prefer the A35's results with better skin tones and hair rendering. Both phones can shoot 4K video from their main cameras with only 1080p available for ultra-wide and 2x digital zoom footage, and video quality is remarkably similar between the two. So here's our verdict after putting both phones through their paces. The Galaxy A36 and A35 are both excellent mid-range devices that represent some of the best value in Samsung's entire lineup. The differences between them are subtle rather than revolutionary. You get a brighter display on the A36, which is genuinely useful, faster 45-watt charging versus 25 watts, which is practical but not game-changing, and a chipset swap that offers slightly better GPU performance at the cost of gaming battery life. The longer software support is definitely a plus for the A36, but you lose that expandable storage, which some users will really miss. Our recommendation really comes down to pricing in your market. If the A36 costs about the same as the A35, definitely go for the newer model unless you absolutely need that microSD slot. But in markets where there's a significant price gap, the A35 offers essentially the same experience for less money and might be the smarter choice. If this helped you out, be sure to like and subscribe, and check out more of our tech reviews linked right here. Thanks for watching.